that science fiction often makes us out to be a lot smarter than we are. And like, I'm not like saying we're all dumb. I just think like it always seems so much more sinister and like calculated and evil in that way, where I just think like we'll get to the evil, but in a really stupid roundabout way instead.
Well, yeah, it's like Idiocracy. Hi, I'm Kat.
And I'm Gabe.
And we're
the Ghouls next door. Talking about spooky stuff.
Like the future and the doom that it promises.
Like corporations and flash technology.
Yeah, and poverty and war.
Poverty's still happening. Yeah,
I know, but like extra. It's like poverty plus, you know?
Poverty plus, exactly. Yeah. So kind of closing out our science fiction series, though I'm sure we'll do another one in the future. There's so many like science fiction things that we wrote down for this series, and we just don't have the time or ability to do it right now, or to like just give it the justice that we want to. And so look forward to that in the future. But closing out this series for right now is Cyberpunk, and that is a mix of Cyberpunk 2077, the video game, and Edgerunners, the animated TV show on Netflix.
Yeah, it's the show that made people play the game again.
Yes. Yes.
If you weren't already playing it, because I was, but like not a lot of people were. It was like the usage rate skyrocketed after Edgerunners like kind of gained widespread popularity. And they also added a dope patch that where you can actually like have gear that the Edgerunners had, or like have fighting styles too that are similar to like Lucy, I think was her name. Yeah. So you get like the little cutty strings that are electrified. So it's pretty neat.
Yeah, that's awesome. I never finished the game. It just, I don't know, I couldn't get into it. But I like hearing about it. Like I like reading about it. And that's why the show was so cool for me, because I was like, this is the lore and the people, but I don't have to do it. I don't have to go and do it. But, you know, my partner who was on the episode last week, he finished it and he got the quote unquote best ending, the good ending, although it's still very sad. And I think that's the big thing about Cyberpunk. If you haven't either played the game or watched the show, they're not happy. There's no real good endings when it comes to a cyberpunk future, and that's really the intention, right? You know, whereas in our Star Trek episode we talked about hope, we talked about the potential of the future. Here we're stuck on the planet, depleting it of its resources. We have fully, you know, plunged into a corporate world where they dominate everything even more than they do now, which just sounds absolutely horrific. We have intense body modifications, which in a very toxic way, in a very harmful to our bodies way. So not in a way that's like, we want our outside to match the inside of who we are. It's, we want to enhance ourselves so that we feel like we're worth something, which is not a good place to start. There's terrible healthcare. There's, you know, rebels and people who are trying to fight against, you know, the machines that be, whether that be capitalism, white supremacy, patriarchy, etc., who suffer a lot of loss and a lot of damage because it's kind of a losing game. Yeah,
it's I'll get a little into the history of the world of cyberpunk, but it's meant to be bleak. It's not a hopeful future. It's a future in which like it starts similar to Star Trek, honestly, in that there's nuclear things that happen, there's lots of war and what have you, but instead of like being like, oh, we learned, it's the opposite. It's like hard lean in to what literal bit of society is left. It's not what is it with the where you have like the apocalypse, but there's like
dystopia, utopia.
Utopia. Yeah, it's not a dystopian utopia. It is very much leaning in like the mist ideology of like doom and gloom. Like we're not okay in this future. And what's interesting is like there are pieces of it that like started with good intentions and then were like morphed through these like really selfish corporations that we only get like a small window. We get one, you know, like in this world, there's like supposed to be like multiple corporations who are ruling different like nation states of sorts in the United States. But we're really only getting one in the game and only one in the show as well.
Yeah,
so,
Arasaka. But I mean, there's really only 3 that are running everything now. So I feel like that's pretty realistic to narrow it down to one, right? And to see, to show it has so much power. I know there's a lot of, you know, for example, in South Korea, there's a lot of organizations that own a lot of different things. So like that's like having like we have chains here, but they're like in your face, or we own an entertainment company, but we also own like fossil fuels, or we own the mall, we own the media, like, and they own all those things, and it's kind of oddly celebrated. And so I think we're not far from that future. Yeah, because they already are kind of doing that like in the background and just like not being obvious with it.
It's the illusion of choice. We have the illusion that it's not the same as over there, but it is exactly the same. Yeah, like I feel like it was the company who makes mason jars also is on like the side of rockets. Ball. It's like the company. It literally makes it's named Ball, and like they're also in with like weapons research and other like just things that you'd be like, why would a mason jar company need to be like, in the so it's like they are there, it's just a little more subtle.
Or just, you know, backtracking from any media company that is out there and seeing like where do they get their money, and oftentimes it's like BlackRock, right, which is also where we're getting our cereal. So it really is insidious in that way, right? Like it's everywhere, and in here it's Arasaka, it's like that, and it is everywhere, and it's controlling them in a variety of ways. I did look up, because like cyberpunk itself is a genre, so there's also solar punk, which I would love when we come back to this series. I would love to do some about solar punk, because that's more of envisioning futures where we persevere and we adapt to what we inevitably will do to our environments. And so, you know, like the climate change, those things, detrimental things are going to happen. But then with solar punk, it's like, okay, now what, right? Like we're still here. How do we keep going, right? And so it has a hopeful aspect. Whereas cyberpunk is specifically has the definition for it is that it's a genre that often features countercultural antiheroes trapped in a dehumanizing high-tech future. So, and that's exactly what it is, right? A lot of the technology is to deprive you of the humanness of us, right? Instead of being enhancers or ways to better us or make things easier. Right? Like they're not there. So it's like, oh, you have robot limbs so that we can work efficiently, or we could, you know, now get from point A to point B and without like stressing out our limbs or adapt to the world around us. A lot of it is like superficial. Like it's not needed, it's wanted, and it's because those are status symbols. Those are symbols of power, right, of worth, and make you feel like you belong in this world that's working really hard to make anyone who's not the elite and wealthy feel like they don't belong here and that they're just scum of the earth.
Yeah, and they really like lean into, because it's your AI in a world without capitalism would eliminate capitalism. It would remove the necessity for it, because like the technology would facilitate us not needing to work in the same way that we do now. But under capitalism, it is inherently going to morph into this like gross, you thought you could have insurance for your to get like your organs fixed. No, we just give you robot parts if you can afford them. Otherwise, just die. It's like the Repo Genetic Opera, but now it's like enhanced robot limbs, or like you have lasers in your eyes and stuff. Like it's really just like, as you said, not. It started, the creation of it and the development of the industry started as like a response to people who had been injured in war. But then it developed under capitalism into this really gross, like who can be the most strong and can rule the subsets of this corporate culture to make sure that like you're on top surviving this and like taking advantage of this exploitative system. So it's fun. But
it's just it just exacerbates all of the issues we have, right? And that's what I feel like AI kind of does as well. It exacerbates issues we already have, and in this case it's just like, oh, you know, like people who are unwell mentally, like if we're thinking, okay, this started to help soldiers, right? We have soldiers who have PTSD and now they have mechanical things that are connected to their brain that cause them to have even more of those traumatic events happening, and to influence more hallucinations and a breakdown of reality for them. And so it exacerbates that issue. It exacerbates like our image of ourselves. It exacerbates our health, right? Just like how we view what is healthy and how we maintain that health for ourselves. And it also,
okay. I was gonna say like, and our capacity for violence, because it's like a lot of the enhancements that do exist are like weapon based, which like if it was just like you had technology helping you, it'd be different. But it's like they're getting whole guns that pop out of their arms so that they can blow everyone. Like, you know, it's like the creation of automatic weapons, but now they're attached to your body.
Because I mean, I can imagine the arguments that were happening, right? When those first started popping up and it became more recreational, was, you know, the only thing to combat a guy with guns for arms is more guys with guns for arms. Right? Like, so seeing how we even just manage in our country, or lack thereof managing, assault rifles and other violent acts just makes it all the more believable that that's the way that they would, like how it would evolve into something like this. And I think there's also, it exacerbates the separation of the 1% from everybody else. Like it furthers that gap because of the technology, because to get to that technology, you have to have a lot of money. And then we've equated technology with worth and wealth, right? And so it widens that gap. And then even the technology that does help and save your life is like, we have the capability, so maybe not to the extent of something like Star Trek, but we have the capability to save people's lives in a quick and easy way. And we literally just don't. So like, I'll talk about it when I talk about the show. But that was one of the biggest things for me that absolutely shook me. And it's very telling of the entire society and it also just felt really like honest, and something that we're seeing now. Like, it doesn't feel like a crazy leap. Like, besides the fact that it's like technology, people put guns in their bodies, right? Like, if they could, they would. I think the ideas of what people do with this technology and how they treat each other, it feels like that's what would happen, because there's going to be a lot of desperation, because that's what we're told to how to react. That's what we're told to expect. And so then we preemptive get violent about it.
Yeah, and the environments don't set up for anything less than that too, because they're very. When I get into the history of it, it all makes sense. It all connects.
Well, why don't you get into it?
Of course. Okay, I will. Let me do. Okay, so as Gabe said, we're talking about Cyberpunk 2077 and Phantom Liberty. I, as an avid gamer, primarily will be focusing on the game with just like the lore of how we got here. So Cyberpunk and the plot lines in it are based actually on a role-playing game by Mike Powsmith called Cyberpunk: The Role-Playing Game of the Dark Future, released in 1988. So Cyberpunk, as the board or the role-playing game, developed into this video game and then also went into the lore of the show. So this game was made in the late 80s, and the future that it envisioned was literally like this within the years it was made. It was like, this is happening soon. So the plot of Cyberpunk, both the RPG and the video game, is that in the late 1980s, the CIA, NSA, and FBI joined together to back the president and remove democracy. They announce a war on drugs and communism and begin invading Southern American countries, resulting in a war that leaves many Americans with severe injuries, lost limbs, and impacted bodies. The demand for cyberware goes up to support the widespread need in the population. The war results in a nuke being dropped on NYC, New York City, ending the lives of millions. And after the bomb and attempts to run damage control, the government manipulates the stock market, causing it to collapse, and the country suffers a devastating economic crisis, which takes place in the mid-1990s. During this time, 100 million people plus die from the combination of plagues, nuclear attacks, and ecological disasters. Corporations gain more power with the wealth gap widening, and with widespread poverty and corporate manipulation, gangs take over the large areas in between cities, as well as areas within the cities, and the government no longer holds the most power within society. And in fact, it basically becomes entirely irrelevant next to these huge corporations that have survived this like nuclear situation. So the corporations take over, and in this power vacuum, the war over territories are referred to as the corporate wars. So essentially all these different corporations war over different factions within the US. Cali specifically is where California is where Cyberpunk is positioned. It's a California-based city called Night City. I think it's really funny because California is just like very oftentimes the backdrop for a dystopian future. It was the future we saw with Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower. It's just really funny. It's like
a pretty dystopian place, to be honest.
Yeah. So it ends up being known as Night City, and then we enter into this corporate-run city run by Arasaka, who is the owner of this big corporation that does tech and like all these other kind of like net-based technology fronts. And anyone who works for him is unaffectionately referred to as corporos. So they're the people who are like working in the labs in the like cybernetics industry and are like working. It's like the job, honestly, in this version of society that you want because it's the most stable. You have to sacrifice a lot of your humanity to be in it, but you get enough money where you're not in the same position as the other people within the city. So I'm going to start. And
we see that in the show. There's like a character who is a corpo, and you see that their sacrifice is made and what they have to do. Yeah, no, it's like everyone ends up losing in this version of society, like even the people who like are supposed to be benefiting from it. It's kind of like how, you know, it mirrors our own society just in a more horrific way. So spoilers for the game, we'll start here, just so you know. Arasaka's company has developed the technology to store someone's consciousness into a chip after death, in essence making them immortal. The chip is theorized to be this one-of-the-kind thing that currently stores the consciousness of Keanu Reeves, Johnny Silverhand, who is a former terrorist and activist, more radical of that word, who threatens Arasaka and does a lot of stuff to like fight back, but is also like the leader of a band, and it's like a whole thing. But the chip, essentially, and the technology that surrounds the chip and like monopolizes Arasaka's industry is what really fuels your character development in the game, because you become positioned with this immortality chip that ends up eating away at your own consciousness, and there's a lot of hallucinatory things that happen. But basically
you're positioned in the game of like trying to like deal with this dystopian future where corporations rule everything, specifically Arasaka, and everyone's just kind of ouch. You know, everyone's dealing with poverty, even like if you're in a corpo position, because you can start the game from 3 different positions. You can start as a corpo, or a nomad, which means you live outside the city, or you are like a street kid. So like you're from the city, but like you are not of wealth. And then like each kind of subset of this faction ends up interacting with all these different characters. But like even in a position of corpo, you can easily get stripped from your position. You're actively taken advantage of, as we see like in the show too. Like you have characters who are just like their lives are considered expendable to the company. And like in the game, there's even like a scene where like they just like murder people for no reason. Like there's like, you're not working hard enough, bye. And those are the people who are like supposed to be benefiting from the system the most. So it's just like, yeah, everyone in this version of the future is disposable at the expense of the upper class getting more wealth, specifically Arasaka. Like he is God in this society. So as you continue playing, there's like a new expansion that's coming out that even expands upon the world. And we get this kind of backdrop on like what happened to the government. That's what they're positioning it as. So essentially you enter into a new town that is a lot like outside of Night City. You get to see a different area of the US. And essentially we find out that Night City, run by this corporation, is totally independent of what they call the new US, which is like a galvanized, more radical version of our own government, who's like, yay, we're bringing back the stars and stripes. We're gonna fix America.
Make it great again.
What's interesting, we do have like a woman president, which is dope. Other than that, so in the Phantom Liberty, you're basically getting the future. So it positions us in the middle of the game. So you basically have to restart your entire save file, which is actually fine because like lots of people play to like the last mission and then just don't do it because they want to stay in the world. Because when you beat the game, you don't get to stay in Night City. So this ends up in the middle of the game, offering new endings, game mechanics, etc. But the plot extends and gives more context to what happened to the United States, stating that in the late 2060s, a new government establishes itself as a new United States, because America loves to just say new and say we're fixed, like New York or, you know, whatever. So Night City is independent of that, and a lot of the corporate people still exist in position of power. They're just in new suits. So it's about what our government is now. But you're tasked with helping the president not get murdered by the corporation people. And it looks like it's going to be actually pretty cool. It adds a lot of new gameplay features and this like new battleground where essentially you have a warlord who is similar to Arasaka, but a little bit more radical in that he's like, I don't care about society. We have a militia state. We got guns and cyber technology, and we're going to use it to get as much power as possible. So it looks interesting. But that's kind of like the setup for what the world is. We faced this nuclear event. We faced ecological disasters. We faced plagues like we are facing literally now. And a lot of the game is set up literally, it was written in the 1980s, but it positions itself as the future is now. Like it's the future we're living. Like if in this timeline, we are currently in the part where everything dies.
That seems to be the
theme. Yeah.
The theme, yeah.
And we're living up to it. I mean, look outside, but
yeah, like if the future hasn't already happened, like in the case of like Blade Runner or Back to the Future, right? Where those were the days or whatever that like we've already passed their future. Then we're in the midst of the catalyst events that will propel us into some future. And I believe it, right? Like if we look at history and look at other catalyst events that brings you to either a renaissance of sorts, right? A way to for people to cope, right? To find a way to express ourselves, to channel all our grief and pain into something beautiful or just different, not violent. Or it could be something that ends up being violent, right? It ends up being war. It ends up being detrimental to environment and to vulnerable populations everywhere.
Yeah, and it's just funny because it's like they declare a war on drug and communism, which is already something that happened during like Reagan era.
Yeah, that's
as well as Bush. So like it's very spot on in terms of like the backdrop of society we're getting, and is very realistic considering how like divided our current country is on a lot of like very foundational views. To expect that things, if prompted to a certain point, would hit the fan. Maybe we're not invading South America, but maybe it's somewhere else. We have lots of enemies. Someone else just decides New York City doesn't need to be here anymore. And then we're pushed into this future where like we already have the pandemic has set up the wealthy corporations to be overpowered and to be in this position where like we're seeing the wealth gap rise and rise and rise, and cost of living and like basic necessities are inaccessible. I think it is reasonable. And if we had a big war where everyone came back and they needed these accessibility features that were technology motivated, because that's
put guns on them.
Yeah, the technology that we currently have, something that would start as like a nice thing would rapidly transform into what we see in Cyberpunk 2077, as well as the show. And it's like, I want to say like it wouldn't happen, but like a lot of the pieces of the puzzle do exist. It wasn't like that far of a reach. It is one of those like doom and gloom ones though. So in a world where maybe we take a different direction and there is some hope, that would be cool.
Yeah, I think, I feel like a lot of the similarities of this turning event is like you were saying, like the parable of the sower, like the same rhetoric is being told, although environmental disasters played a heavier hand in hers. I also found it really interesting when you were saying that they went towards South America and were fighting them. Just because in the show we're following David Martinez, who's played by Zach Aguilar, who is the voice of Tanjiro in Demon Slayer, just as a little tidbit for people who are listening. But I really enjoyed that it was a Latina person who we get to kind of watch as a protagonist and see walk through this, but to hear that those are the communities that were like the start of their war and this divide might even add more. Like if I were to watch again, I wonder if there are even
pick up on some more things.
Some even just blatant racism things. I feel like it's easy to like they get overshadowed by a lot of the many other issues that are happening in the show. But that's not to say it is not there, because it is. And I think it's again, it's only exacerbated. I would love to see, and you talk about this at the end of the episode too, but I just feel like that science fiction often makes us out to be a lot smarter than we are. And like, I'm not like saying we're all dumb. I just think like it always seems so much more sinister and like calculated and evil in that way, where I just think like we'll get to the evil, but in a really stupid roundabout way instead.
Well, yeah, it's like idiocracy. And that, I mean, honestly, that is like kind of the future that Arasaka promotes, like outside of the tech industry. Like there is not school, there is like not for anyone else, you know, the only people who get educated in this society are really just like being put to prepare for the factory that is
they can go,
working for Arasaka. But like in terms of like society and like are people super smart in that game? No.
And they're constantly using the virtual reality
brain dances,
to go somewhere else. Absolutely. It's a very I'd say it's more on the spectrum of Brave New World than any Orwellian or just in that like we seek pleasure, and that sometimes, like, I feel like is more likely a downfall. Like pleasure and comfort is easier to placate us enough that we won't pay attention, and we'll let anything happen.
And like, the technology provides that kind of placation through like it's easier to access brain dances than it is to access like clean food.
Yeah. Or like, educational brain dances. It's more of like, escapes instead of like, you're not reading a book.
And I mean, even Octavia Butler's Future, there were a kind of brain dance. There was like that really fancy technology that you like, and you get a little bit in the first book, and then a little bit more in the second book, where like it's just like an alternate reality to just kind of like take you out of this hellscape. It's also like their way of adding propaganda and stuff like that too to the population. So
they also weren't allowed to have books, and in schools were really infrequent. They weren't public anymore. They were still required, but public schools didn't exist. Yeah. So it was like, it's required, but you got to figure it out. Which again, like she was predicting it. It's not super far off. But let me talk about the show. Do it. So it is a short series, and it completes, right? So it doesn't leave you on a cliffhanger. It leaves you really sad. It has a really great soundtrack. And to this day, like if I hear the one song, they're like, I want to stay at your house, I just like want to cry. Yeah. I'm like, no. It is a great soundtrack. Cyberpunk is just a great aesthetic. It's so fun. It's silly. It's like your clothes don't make any sense, right? Just like the technology, right? You're not doing it as a practical thing. It's just like we wear jackets, but they're not all there, Yeah. Like whatever it is. So it's also funny. I was looking at this one article. I can't remember what it was, but they were making fun of the name. So it's called Cyberpunk Edgerunners. And the whole idea of cyberpunk is that you're these fringe people, right? You're on the fringe of society, like you're punks, and you're going against the man. And edgerunners are that in cyberpunk society. So just like cyberpunks. So they're like, this is the same thing. This name is silly. So they're called Cyberpunk Edgerunners, and it was from 2022, and it's about a street kid trying to survive in a technology and body modification obsessed city of the future. Having everything to lose, he chooses to stay alive by becoming an Edgerunner, a mercenary outlaw, also known as a cyberpunk, and it's created by Rafal Jacki. And so, like I said, it follows David Martinez, who's this young kid who more or less has a bright future ahead of him. He's smart, and that has been shown as an opportunity to elevate him possibly from the caste system that he has found himself in. So it's a big pressure point with his mom, who Gloria, who wants him to continue going to this elitist school that he goes to, that he's picked on for being an outsider because everyone else who's there is there because of money, right? So he's a scholarship kid. And he obviously doesn't fit in, but he really loves his mom, and he tries. And he also isn't like super into the cyberpunk world. Like he's also an outsider of that, right? He's super regular. And he's trying, but horrible turn of events. So his mom is first responder. So she works in like the space ambulances, like the air team, all the cars are flying. So she's in a space ambulance of some sort, and we'll go around like an EMT, space EMT, future EMT, and saves people's lives. She works literally for that company and works to protect people. And then it turns out she's been doing something shady on the side to be able to afford for them to live, and also to support him going to school so that he can leave this world. This circumstances, right? After a really horrible car accident that leaves his mom in critical condition, the EMT, the same ambulance company that she works for, shows up and takes the other people who are in this accident away, and they don't take her because she doesn't have the right insurance. And that drove me insane. That to me was like such a, like, it was such a big statement, right? And they really hammer it home. Like, it's the most unsubtle thing. They really want you to be like,
no one cares about
this
poor
sucks.
people.
Yeah. And it's like, she literally works for these people and she doesn't have insurance.
Yeah.
Like, or this level of insurance or whatever. And if she did and they had taken her because they have the technology, she would have lived. And that's, I think, one of the biggest things. So this catalyst drives David to partake in the body mod world, which then leads him into a band of Edgerunner mercenaries who, you know, more or less steal from the rich and the regular to give to themselves to live the life that they do. They go on certain missions. It's like kind of vague sci-fi stuff that they're doing. They're like hacking really quickly, and because the device that he has outfitted himself with is super the Sandivistan makes him really fast, but most people it doesn't work with just genetically, and so then that gives him like this feeling that he's special. But then on top of that, it like makes him really fast. But everyone knows when you have a body mod of this level, it's risking your life because it does stuff to your brain, because your brain is organic. It's the one thing we can't change, and so it's like it can't keep up, and so your body is also trying to compensate for that. But it makes them really fast. Makes them a nice asset for this team. And it's a team of quirky folks who all have their own issues going on, including Maine, who's like their leader of sorts, who is incredibly addicted to body modifications and being big. He wants to be a big guy. And it's kind of sad because, like, as big as he is, like, he's super soft. He's super sweet. He becomes kind of like a pseudo father figure for David. But we see in his kind of downfall rather quickly the effects of the body modifications on your brain. So it's a great look into kind of PTSD in that way. It's also, there's a pride issue, right? Pride is really what his downfall was at the end of the day, because he could have had help. He could have stopped, but he didn't want to look weak in a society where weakness does mean that you're worthless and that you might die, right? Even though he's dying now, right? That was a big thing. There's like Rebecca and her brother, who is gone quite early, so I forget his name. What a way to go. That was insane. She's loud. Everyone loves her. I love her because she was loud. I love people who take up a lot of space. I think we're told so often to not do that and to be quiet. And that's something I really liked about her, is that she never did that. Even when she was like pursuing David and she was really interested, there's like, you know, constant jabs at her to be like, well, if you were just like quiet, if you were just like, you know, cute instead of obnoxious, and she's like, no. I'd rather be obnoxious. And she gets like these huge arms, like, and she's so little. Oh my god, out of all the things, I was like, Maine was really sad. Even David is really sad. Like, everyone's sad, right? Everyone's gonna die, more or less does, because that's kind of what any heist film is about. So just know that they're heisting in ways, so everyone's gonna die in some way. She was the worst. So
they're also like being set up and like exploited by Arasaka inadvertently.
Yeah, but that's kind of like what happens with heist movies too, right? There's always somebody pulling strings. It's the one last run before we go straight, and you know it's not the one last. It's the one last run because you're dead. You die and you can't do anymore. And that's kind of what this show follows. That in a way, it's really unconventional. Like, it jumps you right into the action, and then it kind of speeds through stuff that's happening to people, and like they just die. And then, you know, towards the end, there's like the big events that are happening that kill off like everybody you care about. And I was like really upset. I was like, I don't care if David dies. Like, I love him. Like, boy, I'm feeling for you. It's really hard. But Rebecca, though, she's going through a lot. Like, all she had was her brother, and no one likes her, like, in world enough. And she just trying to help everybody. She just cares too much. So let's just hear spoilers for this short series. So I think one of the biggest things is each one of these folks in the ragtag group all are coming in with their own trauma and pain from simply existing in a society that deems poverty as like a crime. And in deeming that a crime, then does the work to either institutionalize you or take you out from the world in some way.
Yeah.
Or make you not want to be here anymore. So essentially they're doing their missions and everything. You got Lucy, who is like a pawn, or she was like a child hacker that was doing a lot of crazy missions, and they ended up getting taken out. She was like the only kid to survive, and then had this trauma of being unable to do like deep dives. She used to work for Arasaka. So when you think about like in the game where you get to choose, right?
Yeah.
Lucy was kind of like corpo, like she was going to be a corpo, and David is the street kid. I don't think anyone was a nomad.
Yeah, no, I didn't pick up on any nomads. I know, like, it's basically, like, Lucy's whole deal is that corporations buy orphans just like anything else. So she was an orphan, and they were just like, put her in the net. She isn't about a person anymore.
Yeah.
We don't care about people. Yeah. They just, like, murder these kids.
Even if she had parents, they just, they put you in a machine because you have potential, right? Yeah. And that means something. Like, if you can do something for us, you're worth it. For us. And so, yeah, there's a lot, I think, with this show that tells you about just the harms of having this class system, of making educational institutions sanctioned off, like having them be restricted. Talking about health and health services, the fact that you couldn't do that. Right? Like, I know someone who works for an insurance company and doesn't have their insurance, even though they're an employer. And that doesn't make sense to me, and it makes me really upset. Like, now.
Super reasonably. I mean, if we think about like our society now and how like life-saving medicines are behind these paywalls, that like if you can't afford cancer treatment, they really just don't care. And the disregard for human life in general already exists within capitalism. It's just like turned up and more in your face in this like cyberpunk future. Because it's like, there's no longer some sort of non-corporate influence on this. Like, there's nothing like pretending to be like the pillar of morality. You know what I mean? Nothing's moral. They're just like, society and life sucks. That's just what it is. What are you going to do about it, random person? Nothing. The answer is nothing. Buy all these body mods and make yourself big, strong. Like,
make yourself worthy in this society. You know?
Yeah, and then the only one who's like immortal in any sense, even like in the game, is Arasaka, in that like he has a giant robot man to protect him, which we get to see a little bit in the show too. And like there's just literally no one else except for the really, 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 really Arasaka's favorites, the rich, are going to like get any help within the society. And even a lot of that, like the people who are considered corporos, are also just pawns. Like they're just opposable factory workers at the end of the day. They just happen to show potential and be born to the right family. It's either or.
Well, I think because think even more obvious in a future like Cyberpunk that it's not just the 1%, right? It's the 0.001% that matter, right? That have all the wealth, that have all the power. And so even if you are like in the 5%, even if you have that much money for some reason, you still don't mean anything. Right? Yeah. It doesn't matter.
It's like the platform. You look down, you don't look down.
Yeah, you don't look down. And you don't even look to the side. I think that like the game and the show are really great companions of each other because they're filling out and elaborating on the story that's really quite fascinating, and it's super sad, right? It's not, like I said, it's not good endings. It does feel really much like not pointless, but in a way kind of like that, like nothing matters.
Yeah, there's no way out. Yeah, you're kind of like in this future that you can't escape from, or this like life path that you can't really escape from. There's no, unless you're gonna leave Night City, but even then, like they have border patrol, like you're not supposed to leave. Like the nomads are even struggling in their own right because like outside of the city, there's no rules, and people take advantage of that in that version of society. So like, or in any society, but like,
well, because it's like
I think there has to be disaster utopias also, and we just haven't seen that. Like, I guess like even the nomads kind of do exist a little bit in a happier space than the corpos or the street kids, but like it's still
well, it's like rough. What's happening on the East Coast? Right? What are we doing?
We got nuked.
Oh, so we're just gone.
We're just gone.
None of us left. That's
I mean, NYC, Philly is within the range that we would have been ruined. We might eventually get to have people there again. It's just going to take a lot of years.
Yeah. Or people like I don't know why they would. It's probably just not worth it. It's like Chernobyl. So not worth it. Yeah, I think, it's such it's one, aesthetically really beautiful to watch. It's like fun. The style is cool, right? It's like I said, it's quirky. It is at least for the show, it's anime style, right? So you can get really creative with it. It does really interesting things with the body. Not just like with the technology that's happening to it, but just because it is an animated medium, we can distort the body and exaggerate the body in really interesting ways that I think enhance the story. It felt really fast. When I was watching it, I was like, oh God, it's just happening. And now we're over here, which I think added to how fast-paced their lives are, right? Like there's people who living their day-to-day grunt lifestyle of just like existing and trying to find a point to be, right? But for this group specifically, it was about like going, because it was meandering until he met them, and then we were just jumping in, and as fast, like them dropping like flies, the situation just getting exacerbated and worse, I think really amped up the adrenaline for it, and stressed you out. Stresses you out for sure.
And because they're like always on, like they could die at any point, like within this version.
They do.
And they do. But like the fast-paced nature of it kind of adds to that anxiety surrounding that. I definitely agree in terms of like creative direction. I think it was intentional. Although, I mean, I'm sure they probably would like to have a second season or even just like extend it out more, because then that's just more time to make a project. But in its current form, it gets a lot done in a really short amount of time, and in a way that's like, it's one of the more popular shows. Like everyone was talking about it for a few months. So, and it reinvigorated the game, honestly. Like it set up pretty nicely to get people back into the game, and like kind of gave CD Projekt Red like a opportunity to like kind of capitalize off of that. Like a lot of people got back into the game. A lot of the mistakes that they had made on their initial release got kind of forgiven because they had fixed it. And now they were given enough money so that they could make this sequel of sorts. It's supposed to come out literally in September. It's supposed to be September 26th. And a lot of people can buy the game if they want. It's like on sale for if you get like a bundle. It's like $60, which is still like a lot of money, but you get like 2 games essentially. So that's kind of cool.
That's nice. That's really, because I mean, I got Cyberpunk when it was still buggy, and I played it anyway. I didn't really encounter a lot of bugs though. I didn't play a lot. I think it was a bit too open world for me. Though I'm now thinking like maybe I'll go after this episode and load it up. Character creation was fun, and the fact that you could be male or female. I think, did they give you the option of having gender neutral pronouns, or am I making that up?
They let it be that you could exist on either binary, not
your body.
like, your body could exist,
Right, so you could have a femme body, but use he pronouns.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, so that part was cool. But yeah, I don't think they allowed they, them. I tried and they did not, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the new one will be cool. There is also like, I was mad because I was a femme. What is their name?
Pan Am.
No.
The hottest.
Yeah, I wasn't. But what's the name of the character that you play? V. Okay, yeah, I was femme V, and I love Pan Am, and Pan Am straight as F.
Yeah.
And I was like, dang it, put me in the friend zone. I'm not used to that. I'm a Mass Effect player. I can have anything and any species I want. You're supposed to let me court you.
It's like a fantasy game. Yeah, like let me do what I want. I also faced
valid. She could have a type.
Devastation that was not being able to get.
Like we're in the 2077. No one is straight. Okay, everyone is fluid. Okay, I refuse to believe that anyone under the age of 45 is straight anymore. Yeah. 2077. Just putting that out there. If I'm right in the future, that's what it is. That's the future that liberals want. And we will one day get. So 2 things I wanted to say before we close out. One, just realizing for people who are watching, first of all, if you're not watching, again, go check out images. We're dressed up like we're in the future, and I think it's pretty cool. We got cool glasses.
I look dope.
Kat has amazing makeup that looks like their face has been roboted.
I have been body modded because in that future I would absolutely partake. My body is made of garbage. You can put my consciousness in a chip and put me in a different body. Hell yeah, sign me up. Like in what universe? But like I have robot face currently, and it looks dope.
Also the future thing, like with the brain and storing your consciousness, is why I wanted to cover altered carbon. So one day we'll do altered carbon. Vibe. Although it's like, that's also like the rich. Oh.
Well, because they have access to like anything. And I mean, there's like a lot of cool technology pieces that exist in the show. I mean, there's chips you can upload your consciousness to post-mortem. You can also upload your consciousness to proxies that exist in your stead. That's something that happens in the game. So like you can literally hire someone to put your brain inside temporarily so that they can go have a conversation with someone on the DL. And then they turn off your part of them being in your brain because the chip is like turned off, and then you just have no memory of why you were even there. Like it's honestly very crazy. You can do the brain dances. You can become like a doll, which is like you just get different consciousnesses uploaded onto your body, and then like when you're not at work, you can. It's like Severance. Yeah. A little bit. And then
the sex workers are pretty cool for that, actually.
Yeah.
It could be whatever.
Net running, brain dances, like the weapons, lots of cool tech stuff happening that are I don't know if it's like necessarily unique, but was very cool.
Yeah. Well, wasn't there like I think it was not exactly it, but I feel like there was a Bruce Willis movie where you put your brain in a body and you like play it. It was like your substitute or something.
Oh yes, I do remember this movie that you're talking about. I have no idea what it's called, but it is very random, and it wasn't great. It was fine. Like it was a fine movie. Yeah, but it was not a great movie.
Yeah, I was just thinking while you were talking. I was like, of other science fiction movies or like future movies, and I was like, oh, it would have been nice to cover Fifth Element. But then I was like, I'm gonna be real. I don't really know what Fifth Element's about, and I've watched
I just remember like the singing.
Yeah, I've watched it, and I know it has the Born Sexy Yesterday trope heavily in it. That's what I think of whenever I think of that trope. But I'm like, I couldn't tell you what the plot is.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on. That's Bruce Willis, isn't it?
Probably.
He'd be out there.
He was in a lot of movies back then.
Yeah. But one of the things I was going to say, so one, check out, if you're not watching, at least go check out what we did for our outfits because they're cute. But I was thinking my outfit kind of looks like Tifa, right? Is that her name from the Final Fantasies or whatever?
I did not play Final Fantasy.
I think so. We can look it up, but I think it looks like her. From what I remember, Tifa or there's 3 girls, and one of those girls, that's what I look like. Nice. But like cyberpunk version of her. And there was another thing I was going to say. Now I forgot.
Yeah. Dang. Well, in the middle space, I just want to thank a few YouTubers that really helped influence all the information I got. So thanks to Big Dan Gaming, the Neon Arcade, Gaming Harry primarily, and Juicehead, who gave me a lot of the context for what the heck was happening in the history of the game. If you want to actually get like a thorough rundown, I recommend Gaming Harry's video on it called Cyberpunk: What Happened Before 2077. It's so very interesting. I also said the name of the creator of the role-playing game incorrectly. His last name is Pond Smith. Not Palm Smith. It's Mike Pond Smith. Yeah.
Well, that reminded me what it is I wanted to say. Was that I want to try the video game again, but also I want to check out this role-playing game. I don't think I've heard it's not great, like mechanics wise, but that doesn't mean we can't fix it, right? I try to run a Thirsty Sword Lesbians campaign in a cyberpunk dystopia, and so I'd be excited to go back to that and give it a shot because that was fun
with like the context of the show, and then also like if you do play the game again, it does give a lot of fuel. Now I get it. Creative. Now I know more how to shape this world, because I was like, aesthetically it's just cool and can come up with cool names. It's just like a fun place to play when you're not thinking about how absolutely devastating it is emotionally. Yeah.
If you don't think about it, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I love the game. Like, I had, honestly, even with the bugs, I was like, this is the best time ever. I love this game. I don't care if I phase through walls, like, sign me up. Even though it was horribly devastating as a plot line, I was just like, look how cool I look in the future. I got robot arms. I can jump onto roofs just from the ground. Hell yeah. Like, I love my robot body. I can steal my wealth. I don't care. Yeah. Like, I'm going to go on all these mercenary missions and just like steal from the rich and live my best life. So the game was very fun for me because I was like, I'm not thinking about the emotional aspects of this. There are no media analysis classes on my face during this playthrough. But yeah, it's a fun time. I'm gonna definitely get Phantom Liberty. I don't know about anyone else, but
yeah, I think you should, and I can live vicariously through you, because even if I start playing, I know I'm not gonna finish it. I know I'm not. I'm a bad game finisher. I just reluctantly finished Burning Shores. Okay. And I didn't want to do that, but I did want to see romance happen. So I did finish it. But I was like, I was putting it off as much as I could. I was like, have I been to this island?
Yeah. Horizon Zero Dawn is another really super interesting tech-based feature if we eventually want to cover it.
That's what I'm saying. I think we should do video games at some point, because I think we should do Dead Space. I think we should absolutely do Horizon Zero Dawn. Talk about one of the most horrific video games ever. As far as like, I don't think I've ever been so scarred for a twist ending that could ever be, and that game still messes me up. Like, I think about it all the time, and I'm just like, wow, okay. And then Burning Shores really like played up into it too. Like, there's some other stuff happening, but there are like these like side quests where you got to see it would, in the first game, when you would do these like visual things, they would overlay what the world looked like before now, and it would be lush and like it'd be like a building would be intact. In Burning Shores, when you see those, it was in the midst of like when all the stuff was going to hell. So like you're looking at this green space where like nature has taken over this building, and then you're looking and it's like on fire. and there's like monstrous robots on it. And I was like, that was really cool that they did that. Like swapped it out. So you see like how we got here. Cause we know, we know how we got here. Whereas in the first one, you're like, it used to be pretty. What happened?
Yeah.
what happened to this? What happened? Messed up. So one day we'll do that. We'll do Altered Carbon. Maybe we'll do Blade Runner, although I would prefer to do Android's Dream of Electric Sheep, or even the Electric Sheep show. I haven't watched it, but I thought it'd be cool. It's like a anthology.
I'd love to cover Detroit Become Human.
Yeah. All right. Well, there's a few anime we could actually probably cover too. So we'll see. We'll see what this year takes us. We're going to be going on break. So be patient. Go watch some other stuff. Listen to things that our guests have been making. And we'll be back and we'll be re-energized and we'll have some new things for you. And don't get married.
Delete your kids.
All right. See you in the future.